Welcome back to one of my favorite places to play poker. It's been a while since we've been here, but we are here at the Hustler Casino. As y'all know, Billy hosts a game like every day of the week, it feels like, which is a 5-5-10 game. Let's see if we can hop in there, have some fun, and make some money. We have to eventually play some poker outside of what we're usually doing. And what better way to do it than come to where we feel most at home? I'll hop in and see, let's see how the session goes.
And we're getting the action off hot, as it limps to me like 3 ways. Action falls on me on the button. We don't even look at our hand and we decide to throw out a little teaser, a little spicer bet. We blind raise it up to $20, and it seems like the festivities are not ending. It seems like we're still in the mood of giving. It's like somehow it's still Christmas in January, as the big blind decides to blind raise to $60. All the limpers calm with the action back on me. I think it'd be unfair to peel my hand at this point. I think, I've got to go with it. I got to just blind call here and hope for the best. We're going like 5 ways off to a flop that comes Jack 3 deuce with 2 diamonds and a heart. Seems like a good board for somebody that's blind raising, right? The action ends up checking over to the cutoff, who decides to bet $125. At this point, it's probably better now than ever else to look at my hand and see what the heck I have. We peel our hand and oh my goodness, we have pocket queens, pocket ladies. How do we get blessed with such a beautiful situation? Well, I think there's nothing else to do here considering there's so many people in the pot, but just throw out a little raise here. Looks like we can be trying to steal the pot. Obviously, we'd be doing this with the flush draw as well, so I make it $400 to go. The action folds back over to the cutoff, who thinks about it for a really long time, but eventually decides on a fold. Oh my goodness. Massive fold from our opponent. He would later tell me that he folded King Jack. I mean, whether I believe him or not is one thing, but that's what he told me, and I'm going to go with it. Great fold by him. Unlucky for us. Moving right along here, the straddle is on. I decide to raise it up from the small blind when it gets folded to me with 10-8 of diamonds. Suited 1-gapper seems good enough to me. The third blind and the straddler make the call. We're going 3 ways off to a flop that is amazing. Queen 4-10 with 2 diamonds. We end up flopping a flush draw, bingo, and a middle pair here, bongo. We love to see it. With the action on me, I think betting here seems like a decent idea, so I bet $100. Our opponent here from the third blind ends up raising it to $225. Oh man. My hand is super strong here, but I think anything besides just calling might be a little bit of an overplay. I just don't think my opponent's ever going to fold a hand that's better than mine at this specific point, so why not just play a little cautiously, as I am out of position. That's always annoying, but hey, we have a ton of equity. The turn card comes out, a 4 of spades. I check to him, and this time he bets $300. Again, my hand's just too strong to do anything besides, I think, just call. Maybe there's a world where raising on this turn card might make sense, but again, pairing cards is just hard to bluff on, and I just don't think my opponent's in a folding mood, or at least that's not the read I'm getting. After calling, we're going off to a river card that comes the ace of spades. Again, a pretty bad card in many fronts. Obviously, some semi-bluffs now get there. The straight draws, obviously. Some hands that were better than ours, like ace-x of diamonds, now are better than us now. And all that being said, I think we just have a clear check and fold. I check, and our opponent ends up checking it back, and gladly he did. This guy had an absolute monster. Queen 10 of hearts. So that was a cooler of a flop if I've ever seen one. Top 2 pair versus middle pair and a flush draw. Man, that was a freaking... Could have been real bad. There could have been blood in the streets, and somehow we end up pretty much losing the minimum. All right, we're looking to rebound after that one. Action folds to me in the low jack. We look down at a suited ace. I raise it up to $60. The button and the straddler make the call. We're going off to a flop that comes Jack 10-10 with 2 hearts. Not a whole lot to even say that is that's good for me, to be quite frank. But when the action is on me, I decided to throw out a little C bet, more of a feeler, trying to just steal this pot type of bet. $50 to go. Both players make the call. All right, not looking too good, but the turn card comes out the 9 of spades. Brings it back to our flush draw, and honestly, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm pretty much just clicking buttons. I pretend that this is a good card for me somehow, and I just start a bet of $80. Only one of our opponents make the call here. I went off to a river card that comes the ace of hearts. Well, this is the one player that does have position on me, and now that I make top pair on the river, although it does bring a front door flush draw, honestly, there's a little bit of my heart in my soul that's thinking that my opponent just doesn't have a flush here. I think my opponent would have played it a little more aggressive, to be totally frank. But all that being said, you can never be too sure. But what I am sure of is the blocker bet. Throwing out a little blocker bet might save me from getting, facing a bigger bet. That, and coupled with the fact that I just don't know where I'm at, but I have top pair, and seems like a reasonable idea to try to get value from worse somehow or something. I don't know. That's what the cool kids are saying nowadays. I throw out a bet for 25, more of a blocker bet, and my opponent asks if he thinks that I should raise, and I say, yeah, if you're going to raise, 50 bucks sounds perfect. Well, after a little bit of thinking, my opponent ends up deciding on just calling, and he's probably happy he does, as he shows Queen 9 suited. Unfortunately, Queen 9 of diamonds is not better than Ace 4 diamonds, as I have top pair and he has bottom pair. Either way, yeah, looks like this year is full of, runouts that are in my favor. Let's go. Things continue to trek along here, as there's a $40 straddle on, which means that's a double straddle. The button decides to limp here, and I'm in the small blind with pocket jacks, pocket jiggities. Let's go. We decide to raise it up to 160. The big blind and the button player make the call. We're going off to a flop that's, Ace 5-5 rainbow. Again, not a whole lot of greatness here. I throw out a C bet of 100, only the button calls. The turn card is a 3 of diamonds here, bringing it back to our flush draw. At this point, I decide to bet 200, and our opponent snap calls. Couldn't even put my bet out fast enough. All that being said, I don't know, snap calls are usually kind of borderline weakness, maybe a little bit of a draw, maybe a little bit of a middling ace, maybe a middling pair. All that being said, we don't have to worry. Why? Why, you may ask? Because we have a boat. The river card comes the Jack of Hearts. Bingo. Exactly what the doctor ordered. We were drawing thin, but yeah, now we have a boat. And that's pretty much the effect of nuts here. Feeling really confident. So much so that I just decided to over bet the pot. I go pretty big here and I go all in for $910. My goal here is now going from bluffing to making it look like a bluff and getting called by some kind of marginal holding. My opponent goes deep into the tank and then eventually says my exact hand. He says, hey man, I think you have jacks. And ding, 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 you're freaking a genius here. That's exactly what I have. All that being said, he unfortunately falls for the classic putting somebody in a hand but not being able to execute, as I am 100% the GOAT of doing that, just still calling off somehow. My opponent ends up making the call. We are good. He ends up showing ace 10 offsuit here, so props to him for even considering a fold there on the river. Feels like, maybe I have a bluff, maybe I don't, I don't know, but all that being said, I guess if I was planning to bluff the river, it wasn't going to work anyways. But in this world, and on this run out, we were value betting. Nice. By this point, the straddler is almost mandatory, as almost everyone has decided to partake in the action and the fun. The small blind raises to 75. I'm in said straddle, and I look down at ace 9 offsuit. Pretty much any ace here seems like a reasonable defend in position. I make the call, and we're going off to a flop that comes ace 9 7. Oh my goodness, we are just running too hot. Action actually checks over to me. I think this is a good spot to throw out a little bit of a bet here. Make it look a little bit like a little bluffy, a little scruffy. I don't know. I bet 50 bucks. Pretty small here. Our opponent decides to call, and we're going off to a turn card that comes the 7 of diamonds. All right, at this point, it's a reasonable little turn card here. Does pair the bottom card, but with the action on me, I decided to bet $225. Our opponent thinks about it for a brief moment before deciding to make the call. We're going off to a river card that comes the 8 of diamonds. Again, doesn't change a whole lot here. I can make a little bit of a mistake here and go a little too large, as I end up deciding to bet for $575. But the specific hands that I was considering putting my opponent on for a range, I think I'm just not going to get called for sizing that big. I think if I bet something a little more reasonable, like maybe 300 or 325, there's a world where my opponent can talk himself into it. But with the bet this big, although, albeit I'm one of the players that will definitely be bluffing here or blasting off, it still puts my opponent in a tough bind. After quite a bit of thinking, at least our opponent's thinking about it, he decides better of it and ends up making a good fold. So once again, don't find value there, but still trekking along. I am such a sucker for the suited Broadway cards, mostly because I still have this, unwavering belief that I'll end up with a straight flush and be able to have it for the vlog. Either way, to get there, we've got to play these hands. We looked on a king 10 of spades here. I raise it up from an early position to 30. The small blind and the third blind end up making the call. We're going off to a flop that comes really nice, as it comes king 8 for rainbow. The only problem is, we're just not going to be able to do much of the royal flush getting. I decided to c-bet here for 50, only the third blind calls. Going off to a turn card that comes at 3 of clubs, bringing it back to our flush draw. When the opponent checks it to me, I think we can still go for value, trying to get called by a hand like 9-8 or random middling pairs seems to make sense to me, as well as now they're introduced a backdoor straight draw and a backdoor flush draw. Unfortunately for us, our opponent ends up folding. I'm going off to the next hand. We are continuing the battle as early position limits for $10. I'm on the button with ace-10 offsuit. I isolate to 50 bones. The big blind decides to 3-bet to 225. Action folds to me. Probably works best to just fold a hand this week, but why not just make the call here and look to just hit it, right? Yeah, that sure as heck happens. When the flop comes out, ace 5-5 rainbow. At this point, my opponent decides to do something a little interesting and check it over to me. Considering how aggressive this opponent has been for most of the session, a little surprising, so much so that I just decided to play it a little cautious and check this one back. The turn card comes out, a 4 of spades, bringing it back to our flush draw. With the action checked over to me once again, I decided to throw a bet for $80, going super small here. We're going off to a river after he calls. That comes out a 9 of spades, bringing in the backdoor flush. One thing I do have as a consolation here is that I do have the 10 of spades blocking a lot of backdoor flush draws. So when the opponent checks to me, I think I can pretty comfortably go for a value bet. I decided to bet, again, pretty small for 280. I think we've had problems with going too big in spots, and this is a clear spot where I think betting small has its merits. So much so that my opponent goes deep into the tank and saying that this time he thinks I have it. But after quite a bit of thinking, he thinks the better of it and decides to fold. So good fold to our opponent there. We will unfortunately not be getting paid on this river. The straddling action continues on. The button opens for 70. The small blind calls, and I'm in the straddle once again with king 7 of clubs. I make the call as well. We're going off to a flop that comes king 8 rainbow, yet again absolutely crushing a flop. With the action checked over to the initial raiser, he decides to c-bet for 40. Only I make the call, and the turn card comes the 3 of diamonds, bringing in that front door flush. Ends up checking through here, which is a pretty good sight to see, as I don't have to worry about a really massive bet on the second and the third street. The river card comes out a 10 of clubs here, so now, again, although there is a front door flush draw that comes in, again, we still have a super strong hand, and I think allowing this to get checked through would be really, really bad. I think betting here and having my opponent call with all of his pairs, all really good ace highs, makes sense. So I throw out a bet for 200. Our opponent nearly beats me into the pot. After folding to us all night correctly, he could not do it for the third or fourth time, whatever this is. We end up finally getting paid off on the river, and this time it paid off to go a little bit on the bigger size. Finally, we have some bomb pot double board PLO action to talk about, and this next hand will not disappoint. We've got some double board action, and the flops come out queen 5-8, and the bottom board comes out 5-4 ace. With the action on the small blind, he decides to bet 100. A middle position player calls, and at this point we get to look down at our hand, which is queen of diamonds, 9 of diamonds, 5 of clubs, and 4 of hearts. We flop top pair and middle pair, I should say, on one board, and bottom 2 on the other board. We do have some backdoor draws on both boards, which is, again, pretty good. But with 2 pair on both boards, we're looking pretty solid. No one else calls after I stick in the 100. We're going 3 ways off to a turn card that comes with 3 of spades on the top board and the king of clubs on the bottom board. At this point, our small blind opponent decides to jam it all in for about 800 bones. Once again, hand's pretty good. I think it'd be hard for me to begin scoopity-doopity here, so I decide to throw in the call. With only the rivers to come, our opponent shows ace of spades, queen of hearts, 8 of hearts, and 9 of diamonds. So he does actually have a free roll on us, as he has top pair with a plethora of outs on one board. On the other board, he has top 2 pair covering our queen 5-2 pair. We're going off to the river. The top board comes out a 7 of diamonds, changing absolutely nothing. And the bottom board comes out the 7 of hearts. Whew. Luckily, our 2 pair holds up on the bottom board, and we're going to end up chopping up this pretty sizable pot. All of that pain, and only a chop pot to show for it. But you know what they say, everyone loves a chop pot. And to close out today's vlog, we have one more hand to go over of note. Middle position opens to 45 bucks. We look down in the small blind, but with a lot going on around me at the table, I end up doing a super passive thing, and with the suited Broadway, I just call here. A little bit of a problem. I think this plays 100% better when we're playing like 6 or 7 handed as we are as a 3-bet. The big blind calls as well, and we're going 3 ways off to a flop that comes queen, 10, 9, rainbow. The king would give us the absolute coconuts here, which is really great. The action is checked over to the C-better, who decides to do just that and make it $40 to go. I call, the big blind folds, and the turn card does not come any help for us as it comes to 6 of diamonds. I decide to check call once again our opponent's $110 bet, looking to improve on the river, which again doesn't do any of that as it comes to the 3 of clubs. Once again, I check it over to my opponent and he decides to bet off for $250. I'll give my opponent credit this time around, but I just don't think against a specific sizing I can get my opponent to fold if I decide to raise here. Although I do block the obvious straight here, it's just really unlikely for my opponent to be bluffing 3 streets into 3 players, so I give him the credit here, and we're going to go ahead and close out today's session. For some more after the session action, let's order me and see how we feel in person.
Alrighty, so obviously we're not at the Hustler any longer. We're actually here in Pasadena, but we've got to give you guys the wrap-up numbers for the last session. It was a really fun session, to say the least. We were into the game for $1,500 and out for $4,004 to be exact. Was just a really easy going session. When we were ahead, we stayed ahead, and when we were behind, we found a way to get there and then get the maximum on top of it. Like we said, California, not used to being this cold. It's like 50 some odd degrees, but for us here, that's like freezing. Over the next couple sessions, I think you'll either see me playing in some new spots, I think that you guys are used to seeing, or some spots we haven't visited in a while, or back the same old usual. So I guess time will tell. Outside of that, I hope you guys have a lovely day. If you guys have any questions, always comment down in the description below. As you guys know, the WSOP giveaway is going on. So you guys know our podcast is going on. So if you guys want to support me in any ways outside of poker, and you don't even have to give me any money, all you have to do is hop on the podcast or enter the giveaway, because that's the way I can give you money back, right? Either way, it's a beautiful sunset here in Southern California. Pink skies. It's time for me to end the day by letting you guys know, stay happy, stay healthy, more importantly, run good at the tables, y'all. Deuces.